The gunshot echoed through the dusty streets of Willow Creek, silencing the usual midday commotion as Bridget Anderson clutched her father's hand, watching helplessly as life drained from his eyes. The year was 1876, and at 21, she had just become an orphan in one of the most unforgiving territories of the American West. "Pa, please don't leave me," she whispered, her tears falling onto his weathered face. He'd only been trying to stop a robbery at their general store when the outlaw's bullet found his chest. "You're stronger than you know, little bird," he managed, using his childhood nickname for her before his grip went slack. A crowd had gathered around them in the middle of the street, but no one stepped forward to help. No one except the stranger who knelt beside her, his dark Stetson casting shadows across concerned blue eyes. "Miss, let me help you get him to the doctor," he said, though they both knew it was too late. "He's gone," Bridget replied, her voice hollow. "My father is gone." The stranger, she would later learn his name, was Beau Tucker, helped her carry her father to the undertaker. She moved through the motions in a daze, arranging for a burial service at the small white church on the hill outside town. Sheriff Mills promised to track down the killers, but Bridget held little hope. Justice was as scarce as rain in these parts. 3 days passed in a blur of grief. Bridget slept in the small apartment above the store she now owned, but couldn't bear to enter. The business had been her father's pride, the culmination of years of hard work after her mother had died of typhoid when Bridget was just 8. Now, she was truly alone. On the morning of the funeral, she dressed in her only black dress and pinned her auburn hair beneath a modest hat. When she descended the stairs to the street, she was surprised to see him waiting the stranger with the kind eyes, now cleaned up and dressed in a respectable black coat, though still wearing his worn leather boots and that distinctive Stetson. "Miss Anderson," he said, removing his hat. "I thought you might want some company on the walk to the church." "Thank you, Mr. Tucker." Beau Tucker. He offered his arm. "I knew your father, though not well. I bought supplies from him last month when passing through. He spoke highly of you." Bridget accepted his arm, grateful not to walk alone. "You're not from Willow Creek?"
"No, madam.
I work cattle on the Double Bar Ranch about 50 miles south. Was just delivering some horses to the livery when I heard the commotion." The church sat on a gentle slope overlooking the town, its white clapboard walls gleaming in the morning sun. To Bridget's dismay, only a handful of townsfolk had gathered to pay respects. Her father had been well-liked but not deeply connected. They'd only moved to Willow Creek 2 years prior, seeking a fresh start after struggling in Denver. Pastor Wilson spoke kind words about a man he barely knew. Bridget stood stoically by the grave as her father was lowered into the earth, aware of Beau Tucker's steady presence beside her. When the service concluded, the small gathering quickly dispersed, eager to return to their lives, leaving her alone with her grief and the cowboy who seemed reluctant to leave her side. "What will you do now, Miss Anderson?" Beau asked as they walked back toward town. "I have a store to run," she replied with more conviction than she felt. "It's all I have left. Running a store alone is difficult work." "I'm not afraid of work, Mr. Tucker." He smiled slightly.
"I don't doubt that."
When they reached the general store, Bridget hesitated at the door. She hadn't been inside since her father's death. Taking a deep breath, she turned the key and pushed the door open. Everything was exactly as they'd left it, merchandise still displayed, the ledger still open on the counter. The only difference was the dark bloodstain on the wooden floor near the entrance. Beau followed her gaze. "I can help you clean that up before I leave town." "You're leaving?" "I need to get back to the ranch. Boss only gave me today for the funeral." Bridget nodded, swallowing her disappointment. She barely knew this man, yet his presence had been a comfort. "When will you return to Willow Creek?" she asked, trying to sound casual. "Not sure, but I'll make a point to stop by when I do." He touched the brim of his hat. "You'll be all right, Miss Anderson." Bridget wasn't sure if it was a question or a statement, but she nodded anyway. Thank you for your kindness, Mr. Tucker. After he left, Bridget stood in the empty store, the silence pressing in around her. Determination rose. Within her, she would make this work. She had to. The next weeks passed in a flurry of activity as Bridget learned the intricacies of running the store. She discovered her father had been meticulous in his bookkeeping, which made the transition easier. Still, being a young woman in business presented challenges she hadn't anticipated. Some men refused to deal with her directly, while others thought her vulnerability made her an easy target for swindling. She quickly developed a steel spine and a sharp eye for dishonesty. The work kept her grief at bay during daylight hours, though the nights remained difficult. A month after her father's death, Sheriff Mills finally brought news. "We caught one of them," he said, standing awkwardly in the store. "The younger one. He's locked up in my jail." "And the others?" Bridget asked, setting down the inventory list she'd been working on. "Still at large. But this one's talking. Says they're part of the Rollins gang been terrorizing towns across the territory." Bridget felt cold dread wash over her. The Rollins gang was notorious for its brutality and for never leaving witnesses. "Why am I still alive then?" she asked. The sheriff shifted uncomfortably. "Seems they got spooked when your father fought back. Fled before finishing the job."
But miss.
"They know they left a witness." The implication was clear. She might still be in danger. "What should I do?" Bridget asked, hating how small her voice sounded. "Just be careful. Keep your doors locked. I've increased patrols around town." He cleared his throat. "Trial's next week in Cheyenne. You'll need to testify." After the sheriff left, Bridget closed the store early. Fear had replaced grief as her constant companion. That night, she retrieved her father's old revolver from its hiding place and kept it beside her bed. The journey to Cheyenne for the trial was tense. Bridget traveled with Sheriff Mills and 2 deputies, constantly scanning the horizon for signs of the remaining gang members. The courthouse was imposing, and testifying proved more difficult than she'd imagined, facing the cold eyes of one of her father's killers across the room. Justice was swift in Wyoming territory. The outlaw was sentenced to hang, but his final words chilled Bridget to the bone. "The others will find you, Missy. Rollins don't forget." On the return journey, Bridget felt exposed despite her armed escort. Every ridge seemed to hide potential danger. When they finally reached Willow Creek, she was exhausted from constant vigilance. "I'll have a deputy keep an eye on the store," Sheriff Mills promised as he left her at her door. "Try to get some rest." But rest wouldn't come. 2 days later, a note was slipped under her door during the night. "You're dead, witness." Bridget took the note to Sheriff Mills, who frowned deeply. "I can't spare men to guard you indefinitely," he admitted. "Maybe you should consider leaving town for a while." "And go where?" she demanded. "This store is all I have left." She refused to be driven from her home, but sleep became even more elusive. Every creak of the building, every shadow outside her window sent her heart racing. She took to keeping the revolver with her at all times. It was during this period of heightened fear that Beau Tucker returned to Willow Creek. He entered the store one afternoon, his tall frame filling the doorway, hat in hand. "Miss Anderson," he greeted, then stopped short when he noticed the revolver she instinctively reached for beneath the counter. "Everything all right?" The concern in his eyes broke something in her. Before she could stop herself, she told him everything: the trial, the threats, her fear. Beau's expression darkened as he listened. "The Rollins gang doesn't make idle threats. Have you considered the sheriff's advice about leaving?" "I can't abandon my father's legacy," she said firmly. He studied her for a long moment. "Then you need protection. Are you offering Mr. Tucker?" The question slipped out before she could consider its implications. A slight smile touched his lips. "As it happens, I've got some time. Ranch owner gave me a month off heading up to Montana to visit my sister after I finish some business here." He gestured around the store. "Could use some supplies anyway." Relief flooded through her. Though they were still practically strangers, his steady presence made her feel safer than she had in weeks. "I can't pay you much," she cautioned. Wasn't asking for payment. He placed his hat back on his head. "I'll get my things from the hotel. Mind if I use your back room to set up a cot?" That night, knowing Beau was sleeping just beyond her bedroom wall, Bridget slept soundly for the first time since her father's death. The days fell into an unexpected rhythm. Beau helped around the store, lifting heavy merchandise and organizing inventory. Customers seemed more at ease with a man present, and business improved. In the evenings, they would share simple meals, and Bridget found herself looking forward to their conversations. Beau was unlike any man she'd known. Raised on a small farm in Missouri, he'd headed west after the war, working his way through various ranches before settling at Double Bar. He spoke little of the conflict itself, though she noticed his left hand sometimes trembled when he was tired, a remnant of an old wound, he'd said dismissively when she asked. "Why haven't you settled down?" she asked him one evening as they sat on the small balcony outside her apartment, watching the sunset paint the dusty street golden. "Never found a reason to stop moving," he replied, then glanced at her. "What about you?" "No young man courting the prettiest shopkeeper in Wyoming." Bridget blushed. "We moved around too much after Mother died. Pa was always looking for the right opportunity. Then once we settled here." She shrugged. "Most men in town see me as competition, not a potential wife." "Their loss," Beau said softly. As days stretched into weeks, Bridget realized she was falling for the quiet cowboy. It wasn't just gratitude for his protection or appreciation for his help with the store. It was the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the gentle way he handled fragile merchandise, the stories he told of open skies and cattle drives. Most of all, it was how he saw her not as a helpless girl or a business rival, but as a strong woman worthy of respect. For his part, Beau seemed content to extend his stay in Willow Creek. His planned trip to Montana was mentioned less frequently, and he began making improvements to the store, fixing the leaky roof, building new shelving in the storeroom. Actions that spoke of permanence. Their first kiss happened naturally one evening as they closed the store. Bridget had been counting the day's earnings while Beau swept the floor. When she announced a record day of sales, his proud smile made her heart flutter. He crossed to her, and without thinking, she rose on tiptoes to press her lips to his. He responded immediately, strong arms encircling her waist as the kiss deepened. When they finally broke apart, his blue eyes were dark with emotion. "I should have done that weeks ago." "Yes, you should have," she agreed, smiling up at him. That night, they talked until dawn, sharing dreams and fears. Beau spoke of wanting his own ranch someday, not a massive operation, but enough land to run a respectable herd. Bridget confessed her loneliness since her mother's death and her fear of being abandoned again. "I'm not going anywhere," he promised, holding her hands in his. "Not unless you're coming with me." The threat hanging over Bridget's head seemed to recede as spring turned to summer. No more notes appeared, and Sheriff Mills reported that the remaining Rawlins gang members had been spotted in Colorado territory. Gradually, Bridget began to relax her vigilance, allowing herself to enjoy her blossoming relationship with Beau. One warm July evening, Beau took her riding outside town. They picnicked by a small creek, and as the sun began to set, he asked her to marry him. "I don't have much to offer yet," he said, uncharacteristically nervous. "But I've been saving for land of my own. With your business sense and my ranching experience, we could build something good together." Bridget's answer was immediate and joyful. They planned a simple ceremony for the following month at the little white church where she'd buried her father. Life, it seemed, had turned a corner toward happiness. Then the telegram arrived. The Rawlins gang had broken their leader out of prison during a transfer. 3 lawmen were dead, and the gang had been heard making threats about finishing business in Wyoming territory. Sheriff Mills delivered the news personally. "They could be headed this way. I'd feel better if you weren't alone." She's not alone, Beau stated firmly. But maybe we should move up the wedding. Head out of territory afterward until this blows over. Bridget resisted the idea of running. This is our home. I won't be chased away by criminals. It's not running, it's being smart, Beau argued. We can come back when it's safe. Their first serious disagreement stretched into the night. Beau couldn't understand why she would risk her life for a building and inventory. Bridget couldn't explain how abandoning the store felt like abandoning her father all over again. I need some air, Beau finally said, grabbing his hat. I'll check with the sheriff, see if there's any news. Alone in the apartment, Bridget paced, torn between fear and determination. She loved Beau, wanted a future with him, but couldn't bear the thought of leaving behind everything she'd worked to maintain. The sound of horses approaching drew her to the window. 3 riders had stopped in front of a store, their faces obscured by bandanas. Even in the dim moonlight, she recognized the distinctive hat of Calvin Rollins from the wanted posters. Heart pounding, Bridget grabbed her father's revolver and moved silently down the back stairs. She could hear them trying the front door, then the sound of breaking glass. They were inside the store. She slipped out the back door into the alley, intending to run for the sheriff's office, but hesitated. The store, her father's legacy, was being ransacked. Years of hard work being destroyed by the same men who'd taken her father's life. Something in her refused to flee. Instead, she crept around to the front of the building, revolver clutched tightly in her trembling hand. Through the broken window, she could see the men throwing merchandise, breaking bottles, destroying everything they touched. "Where is she?" one demanded, overturning the counter. The girl was living upstairs. "Maybe she heard us coming," another replied, smashing a display case. "Spread out.
Check the whole building."
"She can't have gone far," ordered the third Rollins himself. Bridget knew she should run, but anger rooted her to the spot. These men had taken everything from her. Without thinking, she stepped into the doorway, revolver raised. "Get out of my store," she commanded, surprised at the steadiness in her voice. The 3 men whirled to face her, momentarily stunned by her audacity. Rollins recovered first, a slow smile spreading beneath his bandana. "Well, well. Saved us the trouble of hunting you down." He took a step toward her. "That's a big gun for such a little lady." "I know how to use it," Bridget warned, cocking the hammer.
He laughed.
"You might get one of us, but not all 3. And not before I put a bullet between those pretty eyes." Bridget realized her mistake too late. Bravery had become foolishness. She was outnumbered, outgunned. Fear replaced anger as Rollins drew his weapon. The explosion of gunfire made her flinch, but it wasn't Rollins's gun that had fired. One of his men crumpled to the floor, and Rollins spun toward the new threat. Beau stood in the back doorway, rifle still smoking. "Drop it, Rollins," he ordered. The outlaw's response was to fire wildly in Beau's direction, forcing him to duck behind a shelf. The third gang member used the distraction to lunge at Bridget, knocking the revolver from her hand. She fought desperately as he dragged her in front of him, using her as a shield. "Hold your fire, cowboy," Rollins called. "Unless you want to see her pretty head blown off." Beau emerged slowly, rifle lowered but not discarded. His eyes locked with Bridget's, conveying a silent message. "Trust me. Let's be reasonable," Beau said, taking a careful step forward. "The sheriff and his deputies are on their way. You're surrounded. Then we've got nothing to lose, do we?" Rollins snarled. "Might as well take her with us." "I've got a better idea," Beau continued, taking another step. "Let her go, take me instead. I'm the one who killed your man there." "Beau, no," Bridget cried, struggling against her captor's grip. "Shut up," the man holding her hissed, tightening his arm around her throat. Rollins seemed to consider the offer. "Drop the rifle. Kick it over here." Beau complied, his movements deliberate. As soon as the rifle skidded across the floor, Rollins snatched it up, a triumphant gleam in his eye. Now we've got 2 hostages, he declared. What happened next unfolded in seconds. Beau's hand flashed to his boot, drawing a hidden derringer. 2 shots rang out almost simultaneously. The man holding Bridget jerked backward, his grip loosening as blood bloomed across his chest. Rollins fired at the same moment, his bullet grazing Beau's shoulder before the outlaw stumbled, struck by the second shot from Beau's small pistol. Bridget broke free as her captor collapsed. Rollins, wounded but still dangerous, swung his weapon toward her. Before he could fire, multiple shots exploded from the doorway as Sheriff Mills and his deputies stormed in, filling the outlaw with lead. In the sudden silence that followed, Bridget ran to Beau, who had slumped against the wall, hand pressed to his bleeding shoulder. "You're hurt," she gasped, tears filling her eyes. "Just a scratch," he grimaced, though the pain in his eyes belied his words. The doctor was summoned while the deputies dealt with the bodies. Beau's wound, though painful, proved superficial. The bullet had torn through muscle, but missed bone and major blood vessels. As the doctor stitched him up in their apartment above the store, Bridget held his good hand, overwhelmed by how close she'd come to losing him. "That was the stupidest, bravest thing I've ever seen," she told him, torn between anger and admiration. "Says the woman who confronted 3 armed outlaws with a single revolver," he countered with a weak smile. "We make quite a pair of fools," she conceded. "A pair," he repeated, squeezing her hand. "That's what matters." By morning, news of the gunfight had spread throughout Willow Creek. The town that had kept Bridget at arm's length now celebrated her and Beau as heroes. Offers of help to repair the store poured in, along with casseroles and well wishes. For the first time, Bridget felt truly accepted in the community her father had chosen. The wedding was delayed only long enough for Beau's shoulder to heal. 2 weeks after the shootout, Bridget stood outside the little white church in a cream-colored dress sewn by the ladies of the town. Her bouquet trembled in her hands as she waited for the music to begin, unexpected tears welling in her eyes. Tears not of sadness, but of overwhelming emotion, grief for her father who couldn't walk her down the aisle, gratitude for having survived, and boundless joy for the future stretching before her with the man she loved. As she stood there, lost in thought, Beau emerged from the church. He was supposed to be waiting at the altar, but something had drawn him outside. He looked devastatingly handsome in his new suit, his wounded arm now free of the sling though still held carefully at his side. Seeing her tears, concern flooded his face. "Bridget, are you having second thoughts?" She shook her head, smiling through her tears.
"No.
Just remembering and looking forward all at once. It's overwhelming." Understanding softened his expression. He stepped closer, gently wiping a tear from her cheek. "Your father would be proud of the woman you are." "I know I am." The music began drifting from the church, signaling it was time. Guests would be wondering about the delay. But Beau made no move to return inside. Instead, he offered his good arm and smiled that slow, tender smile that had first won her heart. "You'll walk away as mine," he said softly, "if you still want to." Bridget slipped her hand into the crook of his elbow, her heart full to bursting. "There's nothing I want more." They entered the church together, breaking tradition but creating their own. Pastor Wilson raised an eyebrow but continued without comment as they approached the altar side by side. The ceremony was simple, the words ancient and binding. When they sealed their vows with a kiss, the small church erupted in cheers. Bridget felt a sense of completion she hadn't known was possible, as those scattered pieces of her life had finally found their proper arrangement. The celebration continued at the newly repaired store, transformed for the occasion with flowers and bunting. The townspeople who had once been strangers now surrounded them like family, offering congratulations and advice in equal measure. Late in the evening, as the party began to dwindle, Beau pulled Bridget aside, leading her up to their balcony where they could see the stars emerging in the darkening sky. "I have a wedding present for you," he said, producing an envelope from his jacket. "Read it." Inside was a deed 40 acres of prime grazing land just outside town, with a small but sturdy cabin by a year-round creek. "How did you?" she began, astonished. "Been saving longer than I let on," he admitted. "And your father had more put away than you realized." Sheriff Mills found a bank book hidden in the store safe after the shooting. "Seems your pa was planning for your future." Tears threatened again as Bridget traced her fingers over her father's name on the bank documents. "We don't have to choose between the store and the ranch," Beau continued. "We can have both. Run the store in town, build the ranch gradually. Then, when the time comes, we'll have something to pass on to our children." "Children," she repeated, a smile blooming. "I was thinking at least 3, he said with a wink. Bridget wrapped her arms around his neck, mindful of his healing shoulder. "I love you, Beau Tucker." "And I love you, Bridget Tucker," he replied, the new name sounding right and true on his lips. They remained on the balcony long after the last guest departed, watching the stars well overhead, planning their future in whispers and kisses. The road ahead would have its challenges. Ranching was hard work, and the store would demand attention, but they would face it together, stronger for the trials they had already overcome. 5 years later, Bridget stood on the porch of their expanded ranch house, watching Beau teach their 4-year-old son to ride his first pony. Their 2-year-old daughter clung to her skirts, eager to join but still too small. The store in town now employed 2 clerks, allowing Bridget to split her time between business and family. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, Bridget would remember that fateful day, standing tear-streaked outside the church, uncertain of her future. How far they had come from that moment, building a life rich with love and purpose. In the distance, Beau looked up, catching her eye across the yard. Even now, his smile made her heart skip. He lifted their son from the pony and headed toward the house, their little boy running ahead. "Everything all right?" he asked as he joined her on the porch, wrapping an arm around her waist. Bridget leaned into his embrace, contentment washing over her. "Everything is perfect," and in the golden light of the setting sun, surrounded by the family they had created and the land they had claimed, it truly was.